Brief disclaimer before we get started. This is a theory of what could be, not what it is. Meaning that I am in no way stating the contents of this theory as canon, because they are not. It's just a theory. It could be true, or it could be dead wrong. Regardless if you agree or disagree with this theory, please do not go spreading this theory around as canon. Only the official writers of the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise can confirm or deny that. Please keep this in mind during today's video. The last thing I want to say is that this will spoil the entirety of Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, so go play those games or watch Chugga Conroy's Let's Play of both games before watching this video. Links to that will be down in the description below. With that all said, let the theory begin. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. If you played through both games, you should be able to piece together that Zanza and the Architect are the same person, both being two halves of the same coin. But I believe that Klaus and Shulk are also the same as Zanza and the Architect. This is my theory and I will explain why I believe this in today's video. A lot of thought went into it. The argument can be made that all of these characters, Klaus, Zanza, Shulk, and the Architect, clearly aren't the same person. I mean, Shulk literally kills Zanza in the end of Xenoblade 1. But my argument is that all of these characters are the same person through the cutscene that links Xenoblade 1 to Xenoblade 2, the space-time rift with the Architect and the reason behind it, where the world of Alrest is located, and answers some of the questions that fans have been asking for years via the Conduit. At the very beginning of Chapter 10 in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the players are treated with a cutscene named The Decision that is nearly word-for-word identical to one of the last cutscenes in Xenoblade Chronicles. The only big difference is that we get a lot more background substance due to it being straight from the Architect's memories rather than a summarized version from a sentient supercomputer. And Klaus's hair color, which was brown instead of blonde in the flashback for some reason. Either way, it was a simple cosmetic change for the flashback sequence which means little to nothing and does not change the canon of Xenoblade 1 and 2. But if you wanted to give it some kind of a canon reason, maybe the blast from the birth of a new universe bleached Klaus's hair. And speaking of which, Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 take place at the exact same time due to their universes being created at one time. In Xenoblade Chronicles, during the events of the Mechanic's Core, it's revealed that Shulk and Zanza have been one person his entire life. While Zanza's physical form was sealed away on Prison Island in the form of Arrest the Titan, his spirit resided inside Zanza's weapon, the Monado, waiting for Shulk to show up and claim the sword. Zanza was then able to use Shulk as a half-vessel during the Monado excavation before the events of the main game, successfully merging half of his life force with Shulk and killing everyone else present as to avoid having potential witnesses. One of Zanza's disciples, Dixon, finds Shulk and takes him to Colony 9, raising him to research the Monado in order for Shulk to have a better understanding of the sword before he sets out on his quest and in turn free Zanza. After Zanza is freed, the vessel merge was 100% complete, and his plan to use Shulk as a tool to rule the world began. This is why Shulk is able to use the Monado in the first place and why his ability to use its power after Prison Island seemed to change so much. This would explain why the Architect is showing signs of his age in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 despite him also achieving his godhood status. Klaus is basically a Homs and a god at the same time in another dimension without a vessel, while living in Elysium as the creator of Alrest. In Xenoblade 2, Klaus explains to the party that half of him lives on in another universe, Shulk and Zanza's universe. However, Klaus's body as the Architect is unable to merge with his other self, Zanza, anymore due to Zanza already being merged with another vessel, Shulk. The rift on the left side of the Architect's body is the break in the space-time continuum between the two Klauses. This also explains why there is a space-time rift between Klaus the Architect and Klaus as Zanza, who also becomes half of Shulk in the world of Bionis and Mechonis. Klaus's other half in Alrest, the Architect, can't merge with Shulk or Zanza because Zanza has already completely merged with Shulk. The Architect has had the space-time rift ever since the 50% merge between Zanza and Shulk. As for why the Architect didn't merge with Zanza before Shulk was born, well, that was because Zanza was already partially merged with Arglist long before Shulk existed. In short, Klaus as the Architect is dying. This might even explain why the Titans of Alrest are dying out or on the brink of death, because their creator is dying. And while Zanza wants to rule the world of Bionis with his master plan of merging with Shulk, the Architect doesn't have the same reward. Klaus says that he is being punished for his sins and needs to atone, but he's dying because of his own doing. The need to achieve godhood caused him to fall from grace. This one's pretty obvious. The first low orbit station is located on Earth in the Decision flashback, and later on in Xenoblade 2, the player discovers that the World Tree is that same orbit station. But how do we know for certain that it's on Earth? Well, let's look back at the first game. After the party kills Disciple Dixon and pursues Zanza, they're taken into deep space, more specifically to our solar system. In it, we see in-game replicas of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. Before confronting Zanza at the end of the Mars section, Shulk and the party notice a big ball of water in the distance. The only planet that we know of that currently has tons of water and sustainable water is Earth, meaning that Shulk and the party are looking at the Earth, or rather the current Alrest from the distance. Yep, that means Shulk and Rex are existing at the same time outside of the Land of Challenge. And if you're not convinced that this is the Earth, let's fast forward a little bit. After Shulk kills Zanza, Alvis shows him the first low orbit station, the same place that Rex scales near the end of Xenoblade 2 only long before Rex existed. Shulk is then shown the exact moment when Klaus creates a new universe. When a scientist named Galea, also known as Maynith in Xenoblade 1, tells Klaus not to proceed with the Trinity processor experiment, Klaus counters by saying,
"Ridiculous. It's perfectly safe. We are about to bear witness to the birth of a universe! Once, only a god could perform such a miracle. But today, mankind moves one step closer to the divine."
Notice that he specifically says mankind, a word never mentioned until now in Xenoblade 1, since humans and Homs are not the same species. Homs are generally just called Homs, the Homs, or Hom-Homs by the Nopon. Humans have many names, including Homo sapiens, Image of God, and mankind. For me, this is definitive proof that the ball of water that we see in Xenoblade 1 is Earth, and the world of Xenoblade 2, Alrest, is the very same Earth. Again, we even see the same cutscene in both games, just from different perspective and slightly modernized to make the reveal more impactful. Furthermore, the land of Morytha looks very similar to a modern-day 21st century city on Earth, but in ruins. The ruins were likely caused by the mass amount of energy released from the Conduit when Klaus created a new universe, and while rebuilding the world from the ground up. In Xenoblade 2, the architect confirms that those creatures in the land of Morytha, the Goldos, are the remains of human survivors clinging to their lives. Pretty dark there, isn't it? On a side note, many people have theorized where the land of Morytha is in relation to real-life Earth. While there hasn't been any confirmation, Luxon made a video theorizing where Morytha would be. Go check out his video after watching this one, links are in the corner and in the description. The Monado, the legendary sword of the world of Bionis, and the Aegis, the legendary blade of Alrest, are both powered by the Conduit. This explains where these swords and their wielders obtain their massive amounts of power, since it draws from the very thing that made their existence possible. Even the mysteries of why the Bionis is more powerful than the Mechonis. Zanza might actually be a driver, similar to Rex with Numa, of the missing third Aegis crystal that the architect mentioned in Xenoblade 2 without even knowing it. Klaus explains to Rex and the party that he created 3 legendary core crystals, Logos, Numa, and Ontos, the third Aegis crystal being lost in another dimension after the birth of a new universe. This could have actually been what caused the split between the architect and Zanza in the first place. In Xenoblade 2, we know that both Logos and Numa have a core crystal on their chest, but there's another character in Xenoblade 1 who also has something over their chest, Alvis, the Seer. Thanks to the release of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, at this point it's basically confirmed that Alvis is Ontos. Although Alvis splits away from Zanza frequently, similar to how Minnoff splits away from his driver in Xenoblade 2, he may have been able to give power to Zanza's Monado. However, Zanza probably just passed it off as part of his unimaginable power. Speaking of giving power to Zanza's Monado, each of the other Aegises grant their respective drivers immeasurable power. Both the Monado and the Aegis have the ability of Foresight, one of the key powers of the Monado and an ability Mithra demonstrates to possess. This implies that the Aegis and the Monado draw from the same source of power, the Conduit. Klaus, as the architect, even states that Numa's power comes from the Conduit. The connected ability of Foresight further implies the connection between the Aegis and the Monado. At the end of Xenoblade 2, Klaus disappears with the Conduit, suggesting Klaus's other form, Zanza, relies on the Conduit to exist. So in turn, Klaus relies on the Conduit's existence to stay alive. However, Shulk became the new Zanza, or God, and since he was in close relation to Zanza due to being merged, by killing Zanza, Shulk, or rather Klaus, became whole again. At the end of Xenoblade Chronicles, a third Monado is formed out of Maynith's power stored in Fiora and Shulk's resolve. Another reason for the creation of the true Monado is Shulk's bond with Klaus. Since Zanza is bound with Shulk thanks to his own doing, in turn Shulk is bound to Klaus and the Conduit is able to create a third Monado. Further proof behind this argument is what Alvis says to Zanza after the creation of the true Monado.
Zanza, this is the providence of the world. Even gods are merely beings restricted to the limited power determined by providence. That power, although great, is not unlimited.
You could even argue that Alvis, if he somehow isn't Ontos, could be a mechanical persona of the Conduit, since he knows a lot about the power of the Monado and the power of this providence he mentions. He even says,
I am Monado. I was here at the beginning. and I will proclaim the end.
Basically, he is saying, I am the Monado, or in other words, the power from the Conduit or the Conduit itself. The beginning implies that he was there to see Klaus, as a human, recreate the universe and make himself a god, who is Zanza. Finally, Alvis, or the Conduit, will declare the end. During the half point of the final fight in Xenoblade 2, there is a cutscene, and in that cutscene, the architect, who is on the brink of death, sees a premonition of Shulk saying,
Today, we use our power to fell a god, and then seize our destiny!
The premonition he sees is the final deciding factor of the decision his body makes on which form of Klaus's body to take. Shulk kills Zanza and seizes his destiny, creating a new world with no gods and completing his body with Klaus. Meaning that at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Shulk becomes Klaus, who was formerly known as Zanza by defeating Zanza. This also pretty much confirms that both games take place at the exact same time, which I stated earlier. So in short, Zanza, Klaus, the Architect, and Shulk are all one being that has been connected together thanks to the power of the Conduit and Zanza's own foolishness. Zanza set his own demise by merging with Shulk without even knowing it. By merging with Shulk, he made it possible for Shulk to have visions and continue to have them without wielding the Monado. In his master plan of destruction and rebirth, he had one major flaw in it, himself through Shulk or Klaus. The part of Zanza that Zanza wanted to forget ended up being his own undoing. Very poetic in a way. In the end, Zanza is not really a god because he is not perfect, he is a human at heart. And as Shulk would say,
I just want to live my life as a Homs, in a world without you!
Genius writing at its finest. And that concludes my theory. Let me know if you enjoyed this theory and if you agree or disagree with it. If you enjoyed, you could do me a huge favor by giving the video a like and commenting your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for over 1,000 subscribers in just the span of a few months. I never thought that I'd get to this level, and you guys are absolutely insane for it. Your continuous support is honestly what keeps me going, and I am so forever grateful for it. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I've been your host, signing off.